Take a look at what happened.
Well, that was an unforgettable moment, not just a turning point in last year's election campaign, but a moment in history, the assassination attempt on President Trump. Today on Trump 100, I'm talking to a man who captured two truly iconic images that day. A defiant president, blood on his face, fist in the air, a remarkable image, but maybe not as remarkable as the one he took moments before, an image which captured the bullet whistling past Donald Trump's head. Doug Mills was the man behind the lens, and he's with me now. Doug, welcome to Trump 100.
Appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for having me.
It's really good to have you. And we're sitting just outside the West Wing, just next to the North Lawn. This is kind of like your second home, isn't it?
It has been since 1983.
1983.
I've been covering every administration since then. Started out with United Press International, and then went to the Associated Press, and I've been with the New York Times 24 years now. So yeah, this is like my second home, really. It's crazy to think that this big house, as much as I've been here, I've probably been here as much as I have been at home.
Obviously, I want to talk about Butler, Pennsylvania. What an extraordinary day that was. But, many people will not necessarily know your name, but they will have seen your images. So they will remember, for example, that moment on September the 11th, 2001, when you found yourself in an elementary school in Florida. Let's start with that.
Okay.
The image of George W. Bush being told that a second plane had hit the World Trade Center. Take us back to that moment. Why were you there, and what happened?
Well, it was a standard trip that the president was going on to Florida. They were starting a new program within the United States called No Child Left Behind. And the president was going to make a speech, but first he was going to visit this classroom. And at the same time, the First Lady was going to be on Capitol Hill, basically announcing the same program, No Child Left Behind. So that meant they had to, he wanted to meet with some school kids and then make the speech and announce this new program. So it was pretty much like No Child Left Behind month was coming ahead of us, and we were going to have nothing but, speeches and lots of legislation on the Hill about it. So yeah, going into that class, we flew down with the president the night before, and that morning rose very early. And as we were arriving at that school, back then we didn't have cell phones. We had beepers, and my beeper went off, and it was like, call the office. I didn't have a phone to call, so it was like, okay. But then the gentleman in front of me who worked for the president, Gordon Jandro, was an assistant to the press secretary, and his phone rang, and he was like, hello, and he was like, how big a plane? Where, in New York City? So they were talking about it as we arrived at the school.
And you didn't know at that point what had actually happened?
We had no idea. And of course, what's going on? What's going on, Jordan? So he said, literally, there's been a small plane crash in New York City. That's all we know about. Hit a building. It's like, how big? He said, we're told it's a small aircraft. That's all we know right now. So then we went into the classroom. All 13 of us were in the back of the press, in the back where the press room was, and the president came in and was speaking to the school kids. And I noticed Andy Card walk in one of the side doors.
He's the chief of staff to
Andy Card's chief of staff to the president.
Bush.
And it was incredibly weird to see him walk into the classroom. It was very unusual. Rarely do you ever see the chief of staff in an event like that. And so he was standing at the door, and because I had covered Bush 41, Andy Card also worked in that administration. So I kind of made eye contact with Andy, and I was like, Andy, what's up?
So he was just standing in the corner of the room at this stage?
He was.
The president was being read to by little children?
Exactly. And it was like everything was very calm and very normal. And but to see Andy standing there, I knew something was up, and it was just unusual. So I said to him again, like, what's going on? And he said, he gave me a number 2. And I was like, peace. I was like, that means peace. I don't know what, but he was saying a second aircraft, basically. And I didn't know what he meant. And so then he waited for a moment to interrupt the president, and he walked over and whispered into his ear what he told him. And then to see the expression on the president's face, I knew it was something big. Then we immediately left the classroom, and then he went to make a speech to the nation, and then I spent the whole day with him and flew. The first stop was in Offutt Air Force Base in Louisiana, and then we went to Nebraska, where the underground bunker was. So I flew with him that whole day. And we didn't know what he had said at that moment, but it turned out a week later, when we were flying up to ground zero a week later, I asked Andy Card on the plane while the president was standing right there. I said, "So, Andy, what did you tell the president?" And the president's over gaggling with the other reporters. And he said, "Well, I told him, Mr. President, a second aircraft has hit the World Trade Center. America's under attack." And so all the reporters immediately turned around and like, "What did you say? What's going on? What did you just tell Doug?"
Who's your favorite president to photograph? And also who, you must have got to know them all well. Who do you feel you have the closest relationship with? Who do you get on best with?
I would probably say President Trump is by far the closest I've been. I've gotten to know every president in different ways. Got to know Reagan. He was very nice to me. Bush 41 was incredible to me. Also, great relationship. He asked me
H.W. Bush, the father.
Yeah, H.W. Bush. Sitting in the briefing room, which you have spent many hours in, on a Friday afternoon, the door opens up, which we see the president or the press secretary walk in every day, and it was President Bush standing there in a sweatshirt and a pair of shorts, and he said, "Doug, what are you doing?" I said, "Sir, we're just waiting to go home, whenever you're done with your day." And he said, "Well, you know how to play horseshoes?" I was like, "Yeah, it's been a while, but I know how to play horseshoes." And so he said, "Well, find another still photographer and come on up to the Oval Office. We're going to go throw some horseshoes." So ended up playing horseshoes with him quite a bit. That's the president in that picture. It doesn't look like George Bush, yeah. And that was not the first day. So he invited me back a lot to play outside the Oval Office because there were tournaments. I got to play with Neil and Jeb, and there were a lot of Air Force One pilots that were in this tournament. And that was just like a practice round. And we were playing, and he threw a ringer, and then, you throw two shoes. So he threw a ringer, I threw one on top of it. He threw another on top of mine. I thought, oh, gosh. And then I threw my final shoe, and it landed on top of his, which means I won. So I had my arms up in the air, in jubilation, and he was, frustrated by it. But it was, all good fun, and we became very close during those times because we talked about family. I would throw horseshoes, and Barbara Bush would be swimming in the swimming pool behind us.
Yeah.
And so he was great.
He's wearing glasses. He's got a white baseball cap on. He's got a sweatshirt on, shorts, knobbly knees.
Yeah. He'd just been finished playing tennis.
He's looking pretty pissed off, and you're on his left and hands in the air, celebrating.
After that was Clinton. Clinton was very good to me too. Hillary was, great rapport. Followed her on the campaign. And then Bush 43, again, quite a gentleman, treated me like gold. We have a great relationship. He actually sent me a handwritten note after my Pulitzer, which was an incredible gesture by the former president to send me a note, handwritten, congratulating you on my award and just talking about my career. And so that's the kind of man he is. He's a great guy.
And it's a good point to mention, you haven't just got one Pulitzer Prize, you have three.
Three, correct, yeah. Very lucky. Again, very lucky. Two of them with the Associated Press and one with the New York Times.
Well, you make your own luck.
One more about presidents. President Obama, great relationship with him, too. He and I kind of butted heads at one point during his first term about access, about what still photographers were seeing and what their White House photographer was taking, and, it's kind of the beginning of Instagram and Twitter, where some of the events that we typically would go in, they would say, no, the White House photographer is going to do that, and they're going to put it out on Twitter and Instagram. And I was very critical of that. I was, I went and did a couple interviews, but, batted heads with the press secretary about it. But in the end, the president was very concerned about it. He heard the noise that was happening out here on the South Lawn and in print, and he and I, worked it out, became really, I would say good partners in what we do. He invited me to a state dinner for the Italian Prime Minister, which is the first time I've ever been invited to a state dinner, and I felt like that was quite a gesture on his part to do that for me.
Donald Trump, you said, is the most sort of iconic person that president that you have photographed. Why is that?
I always thought that Obama was the most photogenic. Trump is the most iconic. You can take a picture of him in any situation, even if it's hands, his hair, or whatever, you know who it is. And I think because we have so much access to him,
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Remarkable. I mean,
we can argue over how transparent he is, but accessible, 100%.
100%.
What about if you capture something that is less flattering? Do you feel that he's a particular kind of guy, isn't he? So do you feel that some stuff is off limits? I mean, there's been photographs of injuries on his hand. His hair sometimes goes all over the place. Mine does as well. I don't particularly like it when that's captured for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, can you photograph anything and publish anything?
Yes.
And you're not worried that you might lose access or something like that?
No. I mean, I have photos, especially during the first term, hair standing straight up, and I have pictures of his hair standing straight up, depending on the wind. I tweeted one time, and caught a little from it about from people in the administration about like, was that really necessary? I was like, it happened. That's my job. I have been in a situation where behind the scenes with him, and he's doing something, and he will look at me and say, Doug, put the cameras down. Yes, sir. I'm in his space. I'm in his orbit. I have that kind of respect for him. If it's no different than whether it's President Trump. I remember President Obama saying one time the same thing. We were backstage, and he started to eat something, and he was like, Doug, can you hold off while I eat? I was like, absolutely, sir. Nobody wants a picture of you eating, a sandwich or, I think at that time it was like some nuts or something.
And there was one picture I read about that you took that was on the front page of the New York Times. And President Trump, I think it was in his first term, he didn't look all that great. He had a bit of a double chin, shall we say.
Yes.
And he picked you up on it.
He did, in front of Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the UK. We were here at the White House the day before, actually really the night before, and it was Brett Kavanaugh's big swearing-in ceremony here, the Supreme Court nominee and justice now, and so they gave me some behind-the-scenes access, and I actually went upstairs in the mansion on the living quarters, and there was a room there that he wanted to have these documents signed just for the historical purposes, and I had a picture, that showed a little much more chin than he preferred. And during the photo op with the Prime Minister the next day, at the end of it, he was like, Doug, what the hell? What was up with that photo? I hated that photo. It was on the front page of the New York Times. I hated that photo. I was like, sir, I'm sorry, but that's what it is. And so, of course, then all the British media were like, what is he talking about? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So then they all, jumped onto that too.
But he does tend to like you. I mean,
Yes.
He calls you out quite a lot in a very positive way, the best photographer in the world, and all this sort of hyperbole that Trump loves. Not that you're not the best photographer in the world. You may well be, Doug. But,
I don't know about that.
But is that a bit uncomfortable? I mean, you're kind of supposed to be impartial, independent, and then you got the president saying how great you are. Is that a bit uncomfortable?
It is. At times, it's very flattering. Sometimes,
Of course, yeah.
because when he introduced me to the Queen and said the same thing. You know. And yeah, it's a little uncomfortable, but I look at it as it is like a conversation piece for him, and I think he respects what I do, which I really admire the fact that he is so focused on visuals. I mean, there's no president ever who's been more focused on how he looks than President Trump, because he will look at every camera angle when he's doing an interview.
You've got your camera with you right now. You never leaves your side.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I mean, there's, again, the access for journalists here during the Trump administration, whether it's first or second, is extraordinary. It wears us out. As you well know, we're here 10, 12, 14 hours a day. That's the love of this job, and it's exhausting. But man, is it rewarding, and because we're covering history.
I'm sure. Let's go back a couple of decades.
Sure.
Ronald Reagan, an image that you've shared with me here. It's January the 6th, 1987. The image is Ronald Reagan on the left, Nancy Reagan on the right. They're leaning out of a window. Nancy's waving. President Reagan has his hand in a sort of OK symbol. Yeah, he's his forefinger and thumb together. Where was this? I understand it was a hospital window.
It was at the hospital. It was at the hospital in Maryland where the president went for colon cancer. That was a big deal. I mean, you can imagine anytime the president goes on the operating table and is sick with cancer. And he had been in the hospital for a while, and the media were out there at Bethesda Hospital, because we were getting a briefing every day from the doctors in the morning and at the evening, and we kept saying, when are we going to see the president? When are we going to see the president? And they were like, probably on departure when he leaves.
And then the windows opened and you saw him.
Right. So they said, hey, the president wants to say hello to everybody. We were like, what do you mean? Where? Said, well, we think he's going to come out one of the windows over there that's just down from his hospital room. So then we ran down, and it happened so fast, Mark. And then one of the journalists, one of the reporters yelled up to him, how are you doing, sir? And that's when he did, I'm okay.
A good point you've just raised there. So as a photographer, and I guess maybe, you know, people watching this, listening to this won't necessarily think about this, but you're not asking the questions. So you're not, is there ever an occasion where you shout out a question to get a reaction which you can then photograph, or are you just there to capture whatever happens?
Yeah, I leave that up to my colleagues like you to ask all the questions. I don't think I've ever asked the president a question or asked him to do anything that's not natural. You know, I speak with him out of respect. At the end of every photo op, I feel like I'm like the senior journalist around here, so I always say, thank you, Mr. President. And he's always like, thank you, Doug, and he'll either talk or not to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's funny, I mean, you work for the New York Times, and he hates the New York Times.
That's what he says.
You think he loves it, really?
Yes. It's one of his first reads in the morning.
Okay, but on the face of it,
yes,
he hates it. And every rally, and I've been to many, you've been to many, many more than I have, fake news, you lot back there, he's pointing at us, you and me.
Yep.
What does that make you feel?
It hurts my feelings. But there are a lot of hardworking journalists like yourself who are not out here spreading fake news, you know, and yeah, sometimes it hurts my feelings, and I want to say, you know, sir, and sometimes you'll say, not this group, but he'll say that group or whatever. But yes, he loves to rail on the New York Times, and that's one of his, you know, rallying calls to his base. And then when you end up, you know, I can be at a rally and walk up, and I know damn well that I'm not really welcome in there. But I will go out of my way to make a friend or two with anybody who's there who's wearing a MAGA hat or shirt. You know, just like introduce you. I'm human. You know, what do you think? What's your name? Where are you from? That kind of thing. I love engaging. I'm not there to fight. I just want to let them know that I am a decent human being who works for the New York Times, and you may not like it, or you may not read it, or you've just heard about it. But yeah, I mean, you and I have been to so many rallies, and when you talk to some people at rallies and you hear or see what they're reading on Facebook, it blows my mind. I mean, I was at a Trump rally one time, and 3 women who were probably in their 50s walked up to me and said, did you hear the news? I was like, no. And they were like, Hillary Clinton's in jail. I was like, wait, what?
You're like, oh, I better get there.
Yeah, I better. So I immediately pull out my phone. I started looking. I was like, no, I don't think so.
So speaking of rallies, one rally must be seared in your mind. That was July 2024, Butler, Pennsylvania. Take us there, Doug.
Oh, another brutal day, very historic day, like you said. One of the most memorable rallies I'll ever go to in my life, I hope. I hope I never have to go through anything like that again. But it was a long day, you know. We get there at 6 o'clock in the morning, put our equipment out, Secret Service sweeps it, you know, and by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 95 degrees, sunny. We've all been standing out in the heat. And we were, you know, it started out being the day that they were going to announce the VP nominee. And so there were a lot more journalists there than typically would be at a rally. But, and there are 4 photographers who were allowed in the buffer zone around the president.
So this is just around the podium, basically.
Correct, just around the podium.
In the sort of, like the area between the podium and the front row of people.
Correct, it's almost like a U shape.
Right.
And we are vetted. Evan Vucci from AP, Anna Moneymaker from Getty Images, Jabin Botsford from the Washington Post, and myself were the 4 that were in the bubble that day. And once the speech started, all the photographers who were in that group, those 4 of us, know that we have a maximum of 10 minutes in the buffer zone at every rally, whether it's outdoors or indoors. And so the staff, we have members of the president's staff who were there ushering us around and, you know, making sure we're okay. And, you know, we have a Secret Service agent who's with us, who's assigned just to us. And the rally starts, and he came out on stage. And then once he started speaking, I remember saying to one of the White House staff, I said, all right, how much longer do we have? And he said, oh, we have a couple more minutes, but not long.
Right.
So then I thought, oh, you know, and I'd been around a little bit. So then I thought, all right, I want to get some head-on pictures with the flag above him.
There was a massive flag behind him that was flying from a sort of cherry picker, wasn't it? Yeah.
Correct, yeah. And it had been all balled up in the day, and everybody thought that was some kind of crazy omen. So they the White House staff was, urgently trying to get the flag down to unfold it because the wind had blown it up into a knot, basically.
Yeah.
And that was not the image that they wanted. So they got it unfurled, and down it came. And the rally started about an hour late, right around 6 o'clock. And a couple minutes after I came right around, and I was literally like 10 feet from him, maybe closer. But I had my finger down and got a couple gestures, and all of a sudden the shots rang out.
Take a look at what happened.
And, I knock on wood and I thank God every day, that I kept my finger on the shutter, because I had never heard an AR-15 fired before. I don't own a gun. I know a lot of people, think that every American owns 5 guns, but I'm one of those guys who doesn't own one.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a motorcycle or fireworks or something like that. More like a motorcycle, because it was a loud, like a muffler pop. And then when I saw him go down, I was like, oh. And then the second 4 shots came out, and everybody by now, within those seconds, Mark, it was like everybody's yelling, active shooter, get down, you got to get down.
But of course you didn't. You were running towards it.
Yes, I did. And I think maybe it's the journalism instinct in you that comes out, but not the smartest thing. And believe me, my wife and children have railed on me about, Dad, if that ever happens again, please don't go towards it. Get your ass down. Get out of the way.
You're never going to do that, though, are you? None of us will. That's
no.
It's in our sort of
it's DNA. In our DNA,
to
exactly.
Get the moment.
Right.
And so you just kept the finger
I
down.
kept the shutter down. I was, there's been a lot of conspiracy theories about why I was shooting at an 8,000th of a second at ISO 64.
So I was going to get a bit technical about this, because it is fascinating. But well, let's do it one step at a time, because
sure.
you took the photos.
Correct.
And I guess what happened next? I mean, how long before you looked at what you'd got?
So yeah, I after the president left the stage and I had photographed him coming down, I could see the bloody ear. I could see, obviously the fist pump was, something that I thought about immediately. I've got to get that picture out. I've got to move that picture right away. And then once he was whisked away in the SUV to the hospital, it was not until then I started sending pictures and looking like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Look at his ear. I was just like, I can't believe this happened. And then standing there, and it was probably 2 minutes, 3 minutes, Secret Service agent walked up to us and was like, guys, I gotta get you out of here. You're walking through my crime scene right now. You are literally in my crime scene. We were like, well, take us somewhere. And he said, all right, I'll take you into OSA, which is the offstage announcement tent, which is behind the president's, behind the stage. And so we walked back in there. And when we walked back in there, that's when it really hit me. You walk in there and all of his staff are sitting or standing, hugging, crying. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I got a little bit of the shakes. My adrenaline is still rolling. I'm like, what just happened? And so, I started sending more pictures, got a call from the office saying, hey, send whatever you have right now. And then the next call was from one of our White House reporters, Maggie Haberman, who was like, Doug, tell me, are you there? And I was like, yeah, I'm here, Maggie, I'm here. She goes, what the hell's going on? And I said, well, he was shot. She goes, well, wait a minute, what are you talking about? I said, he was shot. And she said, how do you know that? And I said, well, I'm looking at the pictures now where he gestures, he grimaces, he grabs his hand, he can see blood. And she's like, wait, we're hearing that he his ear was cut on a teleprompter that was hit by the bullet, but he wasn't actually shot. I was like, no, Maggie, that's bullshit, I'm telling you right now. She's like, wait a minute, explain to me again. So I went through and I'm looking at the pictures. I'm like, Maggie, I can see him grimace, look at his hand, there's blood on his hand immediately, and then he goes down. And she's like, oh my God, okay, bye. So then she hangs up, and then they start reporting that, knowing that, I'm there, I can see this. And then she said, look at the teleprompter, right before she got up, she goes, look at the teleprompters and make sure they're not broken. I was like, I'm looking at it right now, it's not broken at all. They're completely intact. And the teleprompter is the glass device that the president reads his speech through.
We call them auto cues.
Yeah, so once that happened, so then I'm looking through and I'm trying to send every picture of the fist pump and him coming down with his ear bloody. And then another photo editor calls me and says, do you have anything of him when he was actually speaking, when the shots rang out? And I was like, yeah, let me go look. So I go back and start looking at that, and I was like, oh my God, I do. She said, start sending them. So I sent everything of him gesturing, him going down, all of that. 5 minutes go by, and my phone rings again. And the photo editor says, you're not going to believe this. And I was like, what? She said, we think you have a picture of the actual bullet crossing behind his head. And I was like, whoa, what? So she said, let me text you this picture. So she texted to me. I was like, wow, unbelievable.
And you had to be shooting at a certain frame rate. Am I using the right jargon
there? That is
there?
right, yes. I was
In order to
extremely
get
high
this.
shutter speed.
Shutter speed.
The highest shutter speed that the camera goes is 0.008 of a second.
Which is quite an unusual
Very
shutter speed.
unusual,
So
yeah.
why were you doing that?
Because I love a minimal depth of field in my pictures. I love minimal depth of field means I want my focus to be everything you see right away, not what's in the background right away. And it's just my style. It's just the way I shoot. I like minimal depth of field. It's like, when you turn on a movie and you see very shallow depth of field. I like that look in still images. So that's why I was shooting 0.008 of a second at f2.0, which means very shallow depth of field. And could the camera gone up to 10,000 of a second, I would have done it. But the highest was 8. And so that's, and then even the next morning after Butler, I'm in an airport and I'm ready to fly out to the convention where the president's going next. And this guy walks up behind me. He's over my shoulder looking at my laptop. And I kind of felt him there. And I could tell that he had on Army, fatigues. And so he said, wait, what are you looking at there? And I said, oh, these are pictures from yesterday. He goes, those pictures are all over the internet. That picture of the bullet, oh my God, I've seen it everywhere. I just saw it on television. And I said, yeah. I said, I actually took it. He was like, wait, what? He goes, can I look at the raw data?
Yeah.
I was like, sure. He goes, I do this kind of forensic work as my job. So when I saw this image, I thought, this guy's got 1 in a million or 1 in 5 million chances of stopping that bullet. You're really lucky. And I was like, I know.
Because of the speed of the bullet, the shutter speed,
Right.
Everything had to be exactly right to get that.
Correct. And Trump has actually told me that he thinks that's the bullet that hit his ear. Because a couple forensic people said that that's how I was able to stop it. Because when it nicked his ear, it slowed it down enough to be able to photograph. I don't know if that's true, but, that's for forensic people to look at.
What an extraordinary day.
Yeah, amazing day. And every time, I talk about it, every time I've talked to the president about it, because he's talked to me a number of times about it, I think he looks at that picture a lot, and he thinks about that moment, how freaking lucky he was.
It was a remarkable human reaction, wasn't it?
Oh, incredible.
I mean, whatever you think of him
Exactly.
as a person, as a politician, the way he reacted in that moment, I mean, none of us knows how we would react, but I'm sure many of us would not immediately get up and
Exactly.
fight. Remarkable.
Yeah, it's crazy, crazy day.
What do you think of President Trump? You know him pretty well.
Personal level, I got, nothing but respect because he respects me. And I respect that he likes me for what I do and my job, despite the fact that I work for the New York Times. I'm old. That may, I think, he found out I'm 65 now, but on my 60th birthday, he invited myself and the rest of the press corps, because it was my birthday, up to the front of the cabin and on Air Force One. And he finally said to me, so, Doug, how old are you? And I said, sir, I'm 60. He goes, 60? And he looked around. He goes, can you believe I'm older than this? And it was just like, holy Yeah, it was just like unbelievable. But yeah, he's got a great sense of humor, and on a personal level, as long as I've been here, the noise, the speeches, all of that stuff, I can't, one of my mentors, Bob Doherty, was always like, kid, whatever, the worst thing you can do is get attached politically to any president. I try and stay as apolitical as I can, even with my photographs. And so personally, he and I get along great. Hopefully that lasts. Who knows? Hopefully, if I take a bad picture of him, he doesn't say, all right, get him out of here. Get your ass, I don't ever want to see you again. But hopefully that never happens.
Yeah, well, hopefully not. Doug Mills, what a pleasure. Thank you very much
Mark.
for talking
Appreciate
to us on Sky News. That's fascinating.
My pleasure. Love your podcast. It's great.